What's up, guys? Static in the Attic. I keep getting requests for Mudflood videos, so I thought I would do one, and I'm just going to start out by asking, which Mudflood do you want to talk about? To anyone new to the subject, this all started out because of buildings like this. This is in Paris, France, and the location and date are actually important on what you're talking about. If you want answers, if you want to just keep asking questions, don't worry about dates or locations. I actually used to do a lot of videos on this subject, and I learned a whole lot of things. The mud flood theory encompasses many different aspects, or at least it did back when I was studying it. And one of those is the idea of a reset, a cataclysm so bad that there was a full societal reset. What if I told you that I've got records of this happening all at the same time in China, Europe, North America, and South America? And this is that's actually really hard to find because it is in fact covered up knowledge. No society out there, no governmental agency wants to admit that half to three quarters of their citizens died in a cataclysm and there was nothing they could do about it. You might lose a little faith in the government. This subject is about 3 years old now, and there's thousands of videos out there on it. But let's just start out with this as evidence in favor of a worldwide event that caused a societal reset. The ancient Chaldeans represented the origin and destiny of the world as depending upon two grand astral conjunctions, on the occurrence of which, in a peculiar season of the year and point of the heaven, it was fated to perish by a deluge or conflagration. Conflagration means fire, burning. In his analysis of the Egyptian mythology, Dr. Pritchard shows that these and similar views were not peculiar to the Chaldeans. They were known to the ancient Egyptians, Indians, Greeks, and Romans. They constituted the foundation of the old runic mythology and are easily traced in the cosmology of the Aztecs or ancient Mexicans, who probably had them from China or India by way of Tartary. Tartary being the name of the landmass of Siberia back in the day, or the Latinized version, Tartaria, which extends over to about, I think it's only 50 miles from the Alaskan coastline. So they're saying that they took that route over into the Americas. The Egyptians represented the world in some of their philosophical reveries as subject to occasional destruction and renovations, which succeed each other at distant intervals in a perpetual vicissitude. At the end of each period, the whole assemblage of celestial phenomena, which are regarded as the influential causes of all changes in the sublunary world, being restored to the same initial order and proceeding in the same catenation as before, the whole series of events that depend upon them follow in their former connection of place and time. The same individual men are doomed to be born again and perform the same actions as before, the same arts are to be invented, and the same cities to be built and destroyed. Thus, comets, earthquakes, meteors, violent thunderstorms, hurricanes, immense floods, thick fogs, great heat and cold may be instrumental in determining these periods. The latter phenomena may react upon animated nature and induce famine, fatal and widespreading epidemics, and sudden migration or extraordinary multiplication or mortality of animals such as locusts, mice, etc. Famine and pestilence may react upon society at large and lead to civil strife, revolutions, wars, and the migrations of nations. Now, all of these have been recorded to recur periodically. It sounds a whole lot like the ancients knew that these cataclysms occurred, and the knowledge wasn't lost in 1835 when this was written. But did you learn any of this in school? Does any of this sound familiar to you? That sounds like a complete reset to me. Plato summed it up in fewer words, saying, with you and other peoples, again and again, life has only lately been enriched with letters and all the other necessaries of civilization, when once more, after the usual period of years, the torrents of heaven sweep down like a pestilence, leaving only the rude and unlettered among you. And so you start again like children, knowing nothing of what existed in ancient times here or in your country. So that was Plato in around 350 BC. I still think historical dating could be off as much as 500 to 800 years, but I'm not going into it right now. Plato was talking to the Egyptians at the time about an ancient catastrophe that had happened at that time, so a period before when they were alive, which would be the period of what I've been showing you on screen here. This is how Luxor Temple was found in 1800s. Notice the guy standing eye to eye with the statue there. Now this is Luxor Temple today. You can see that they had to dig down about 40 feet to get to the bottom of the statues, and this isn't a secret. I mean, they write it plain as day when you're reading about it, but they don't really explain what happened. They just kind of chalk it up to the sands of time. I personally would say that we're looking at antediluvian pre-flood architecture. And there are a lot of these sites all around the world that are all found in absolutely wrecked conditions, like Temple of Baalbek, Puma Punku, and Sacsayhuaman, Woman, where not only are the stones impossibly huge, and it leaves you to wonder how did they possibly move these and stack these, but the rounded fluid look of some of these stones makes it look like they were molded or molten, some technology that we're missing out on here. We don't understand it. Now, all of these things I can look at and say, yeah, these were probably ancient by Plato's time. And by the looks of things, something pretty catastrophic happened, because why would you go through all the trouble of building this city and then just neglect it and let it go to dust for no reason, let alone why is it buried in 40 feet of sand? The Temple of Luxor is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and I pointed out to everybody that, hey, look, all of these UNESCO World Heritage Sites are just putting on parade catastrophes of a prior age. They sell us tickets to see the destruction of former societies. But this isn't Mudflood, because this doesn't answer the question of the photo I showed at the beginning of the video of why is all of this underground in Paris? Is this 2,000 years old? Is this 500 years old? What's going on here? I watched John Levi's latest video. He's the top mud flooder out there. And I thought that everybody was still going with the date that I put forth. People can vouch that I actually brought these things to Mudflood. I originally speculated that, okay, if there was a mud flood and a reset, it had to have happened at the beginning of the 19th century, because there is a lot of crazy stuff that went on right there. And that's the reason I got into Mudflood, was trying to answer questions, fill in gaps of my own research. But I was kind of coming to different conclusions than everybody else. But so anyway, I thought that the theory was standing that this happened at the early 1800s. Maybe John Levi, if he gets this, he can answer this for me, or one of you guys. In his latest video, I was a little bit confused because of this.
So cannonball, earthquake, and bomb, all rendering these cities in the same condition. And the Civil War one being the oldest in this narrative and the most ridiculous. But I think what we're seeing is all the same story, same civilization, all wiped out in the last reset, and three ridiculous narratives given to why these cities are left in this condition.
Now, what he was referring to is 1865 West Virginia Civil War, which evidently didn't happen, 1906 San Francisco earthquake, and then the 1945 Hiroshima bombing.
But I think what we're seeing is all the same story, same civilization, all wiped out in the last reset, and three ridiculous narratives given.
So I don't know, maybe John Levi would like to explain to anybody new on the topic of how the Civil War in 1861 an earthquake in San Francisco in 1906, and the dropping of the Hiroshima bomb in 1945 are all considered the same reset. And we get these ridiculous narratives telling us that it was something other than one event. So, anyway, you guys tell me what part of Mudflood you want me to talk about. How the Civil War was fake, or the part of the mud flood where the controllers expect us to buy this ridiculous story that in the 1800s they could build a brick and mortar church only 90 years after the founding of San Francisco, because that's a big topic in Mudflood too, is how in the 1800s nobody could build with brick and mortar and stone, and this catastrophe killed off all of the people to the point where they just wandered into some cities as reset cities while the mud flood destroyed all these other cities. But wait a minute, San Francisco is one of the reset cities. Sorry, I get confused, because evidently San Francisco wasn't built by our current civilization. It was built by the past civilization of Tatarians, and we just kind of inherited it, but then it got destroyed in 1906. But anyway, in 1858, there was no way that they could have built all of these wood buildings in San Francisco. Or do you want me to talk about how old photos show the reset? They destroyed all the paperwork, but the photos we still have. But there's no people on the street, so obviously everybody is dead. There is the guy there that's standing still doing a shoe shine and getting a shoe shine done. And this is actually known as the first photo with people in it. So does this have to do with camera technology of the time and the amount of exposure it took to photograph the to expose the photograph at the time, or was this because everybody died in a big catastrophe like I was talking about at the beginning of the video? For me, the most interesting part of everything that I've learned is how the earth goes through cycles, and we go through these periods of very strange weather, very rapidly changing weather, increased volcanoes, increased earthquakes, and for some reason there's always a comet associated with all of this. And with today's highly politicized warming weather agenda, they don't want information like what I'm about to read you getting out too far, I don't think. On the island of Cyprus, the plague from the east had already broken out when an earthquake shook the foundations of the island and was accomplished by so frightful a hurricane that the inhabitants fled in dismay in all directions. The sea overflowed, the ships were dashed to pieces on the rocks, and few outlived the terrific event whereby this fertile and blooming island was converted into a desert. Before the earthquake, a pestiferous wind spread so poisonous an odor that many, being overpowered by it, fell down suddenly and expired in dreadful agonies. So, this is modern day Cyprus that you're looking at. It's pretty well known for being a desert type island. But according to this, before this event occurred, Cyprus was a quote, fertile and blooming island. So it turned this into desert, which really makes you wonder about other areas of the world, like back when the Sahara was still green. Anyway, there's a lot of ways I can go with this. You guys let me know what kind of mud flood video you want to hear. Static out.